The Prince, the Invisible Crown of Money. Masters Chapter. Seigneurage, the invisible crown of the money masters, permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. Mayor Amschel Rothschild, The Illusion. Of public money in every democracy, the people are told a comforting lie, that their elected governments control the money supply. They assume the central banks are part of the state working for the common good, but the truth is darker, deeper, and meticulously hidden. Central banks, including the U.S. Federal Reserve, are private institutions. Their shareholders, anonymous, in most cases, are the true kings behind the curtain. These private entities create money not for the benefit of the people but for profit. They lend money to governments at interest, using nothing but digital keystrokes. In doing so, they enslave entire nations in debt that grows exponentially with compound interest and can never truly be repaid under the current system. What is seigneurage? Seigneurage is the profit made from creating money. When it costs a central bank just 10 cents to print a $100 bill, the 99.90 difference is pure profit. In a just world, that profit would belong to the people. But in reality, it flows into the hands of the financial elite who control the issuance of currency. Seigneurage is the most silent, effective form of taxation, one that bypasses legislation, parliaments, and the consent of the governed. It is theft legalized by complexity. Professor Artug Çetin's revelation, Turkish professor of finance. Artug Çetin dared to break the silence. In lectures and writings largely ignored by mainstream economists, he explained that if the government itself collected seigneurage, if it printed its own money without borrowing from private banks, the United States could pay off its $37 trillion debt in just 10 years. Think about that. A global superpower unshackled from debt could be reborn. But that possibility is forbidden, because it would mean the end of the private banking dynasty that rules not just the U.S., but the world. The true power behind empire's history is not shaped by politicians or ideologues. It is shaped by those who control the money. Every empire that sought monetary independence from the global banking cartel has been destroyed. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed dinar to replace the U.S. dollar in African trade. He was bombed into oblivion. Saddam Hussein tried to sell oil in euros instead of dollars. He was hanged. Any leader who challenges the monetary monopoly becomes an enemy of the rules-based international order. Why no one talks about it? Its seigneurage is taboo. It is never discussed in universities, rarely mentioned in economic discourse, and absolutely banned from mainstream media. The silence is not accidental. It is strategic. For the elite to continue their reign, the masses must never understand the system that chains them. A prince's duty: reclaim the throne. The true prince, the real leader of a sovereign people, must understand this hidden mechanism. Reclaiming the right to issue money and collect seigneurage is the first step toward real freedom. Until that day comes, elections are illusions, politics is theater, and democracy is a well-dressed cage. Chapter: The Central Bank Cartel, the Global Pyramid Network. The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. Rothschild Brothers. Of London, 1863, the hidden hand behind central banks. The world's financial system is not a neutral structure. It is a privately owned architecture designed to extract wealth, not distribute it. The vast majority of central banks are either directly or indirectly controlled by a small network of private banking dynasties. These families have accumulated power over centuries by doing one thing: controlling the issuance of money. Among the most powerful of these dynasties are the Rothschilds of Europe, the Rockefellers of the United States, the Warburgs of Germany, the Lazards of France, and the Oppenheimers of South Africa. Through carefully crafted institutions and the quiet consolidation of financial systems, these families became the architects of modern monetary slavery. From gold to paper, the birth of fiat control. Once upon a time, money had meaning. It was backed by gold, a physical asset with intrinsic value. But the gold standard was an obstacle to endless profit. It imposed limits. So, one by one, governments were pushed to abandon it under the pretext of economic modernization or national emergencies. The final blow came in 1971, when U.S. President Richard Nixon officially severed the dollar from gold. From that moment forward, money became debt. Central banks could print unlimited currency backed by nothing but promises. Every dollar created was a dollar owed, with interest. The new feudalist order in medieval feudalism, peasants worked the land and paid tributes to their lords. In the modern version, citizens work jobs and pay tribute through taxes and inflation, caused by the private issuance of debt-based money. The lords have changed, but the structure remains the same. The global financial system today is a pyramid, and at its apex sit the private central banks. They lend money to governments, who in turn tax their people to pay the interest. Wars are engineered not just for resources or power, but because war justifies more borrowing, more printing, and more profit. The debt loop as a weapon: world wars, the Cold War, the War on Terror, the current multipolar tensions, all provide pretexts for the issuance of massive new debts. In times of fear and chaos, oversight disappears. Trillions are printed, weapons are sold, nations are rebuilt by the same banks that finance their destruction. Debt is no longer a consequence. It is the goal. A permanently indebted public is easier to control than a free one, and every new generation is born deeper into that debt by design. Central banks as the real government in this global cartel. It doesn't matter who is president or prime minister. What matters is who controls the money: the unelected officials. At the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, and others operate with total immunity and zero transparency. They answer to no parliament and no people. They are the new sovereigns. Their language is interest rates. Their policies determine the fates of billions, and their loyalty lies only with those who own them. Breaking the spell, to understand the world is to understand who creates the money. Until the issuance of currency returns to the hands of sovereign governments, free from private banking families and corporate cartels, there can be no true democracy, no real freedom, and no escape from the modern feudal system. Chapter: The IMF and World Bank, Instruments of Global Enslavement. The system is not broken. It was built this way. John Perkins, Economic Hitman. The empire without armies. In the modern world, empires no longer need to invade with tanks and missiles. Today, conquest is carried out through debt, trade agreements, and development loans. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank are the two most powerful tools of this invisible empire. Financial weapons used to colonize nations under the false banner of economic stability. But who owns these institutions? Who benefits? Both. The IMF and World Bank are controlled by a handful of Western powers, with the United States holding the largest voting share. Behind the bureaucratic facades sit the same financial dynasties, the banking families and corporate cartels that control central banks. These institutions are not impartial. They serve their creators. How the trap works: a country in crisis, often already destabilized by war, sanctions, or economic sabotage, is offered a bailout. In exchange, the nation must agree to harsh conditions: austerity, deregulation, privatization of public assets, and the opening of markets to foreign investors. These are not suggestions, they are ultimatums. The contracts are written in financial blood. Public services are slashed. National industries are sold to foreign corporations for bare pennies. Natural resources, oil, gas, lithium, water, are handed over to multinationals. The result: wealth flows out, suffering flows in. Greece, a modern case of economic colonization. In the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, Greece was gutted by IMF-imposed austerity. Hospitals closed, pensions collapsed, youth unemployment soared. State assets from airports to seaports were auctioned to foreign bidders. The Greek people voted against austerity. The IMF ignored them. Democracy was sacrificed to save the banks. The economic hitman John Perkins, a former insider, exposed this system in brutal detail. His job was to persuade or pressure world leaders to accept massive loans they couldn't repay. If they refused, the next steps were clear: regime change, coups, or assassinations. He explained how presidents in Latin America, Africa, and Asia were either coerced into deals or removed. Leaders like Ecuador's Jaime Roldos and Panama's Omar Torrijos died in mysterious crashes after resisting. They weren't accidents, they were messages. No guns, just debt. This is the genius of the system: control without occupation, subjugation without war. The IMF and World Bank are presented as lifelines, but they are financial nooses. Once the terms are signed, sovereignty dies. And the people? They are left to pay the bill through taxes, inflation, and the theft of their national wealth. A prince's warning: a wise leader must recognize the IMF not as a savior, but as a predator. No nation ever prospered under its rule. The path to real sovereignty lies not in borrowing from those who engineered your crisis, but in breaking free from the debt trap. To confront this silent empire, a true prince must say no. No to debt, diplomacy, no to financial blackmail, and no to the smiling assassins in suits who offer lifelines made of chains. Chapter: NGOs, Foundations, and Media. The soft power of empire. The most effective form of control is not brute force, but the illusion of benevolence. The empire's velvet glove. Every empire needs both an iron fist and a velvet glove. While central banks and financial institutions serve as the fist, the soft power apparatus, NGOs, philanthropic foundations, and international organizations, serves as the glove. It caresses with words like human rights, sustainability, and peace, while concealing mechanisms of control, exploitation, and destabilization. The illusion must be perfect, the actors must appear benevolent, and the audience, the global population, must never see the script. The United Nations, a noble lie. The United Nations was sold to the world as a beacon of peace, equality, and international cooperation. But like a theater built on deception, its true ownership lies in the hands of its financiers. The UN's headquarters sits on land donated by the Rockefeller family, an omen of the control to come. Behind the scenes, the same global elite that controls central banks and multinational corporations also dictates the agenda of the UN. Its agencies, while wrapped in humanitarian language, are tools of geopolitical engineering. UNCTAD and the African tragedy, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, was meant to support developing nations, especially in Africa. Instead, it became a front for economic manipulation and covert destabilization. Under the pretext of development, UNCTAD policies opened African markets to foreign looters. Resources were extracted, governments were weakened, and societies were pushed into poverty. Beneath the surface, these programs funded or indirectly enabled paramilitary groups, sowing chaos in resource-rich regions. Terrorism, famine, and civil war were not accidents. They were engineered outcomes, creating failed states easy to control, and plundered NGOs. Trojan horses of influence. Non-governmental organizations are presented as independent grassroots entities. In reality, many are extensions of Western intelligence agencies and corporate interests. Under the banners of democracy promotion or humanitarian aid, they interfere in elections, stage protests, and support regime change. Foundations like those of George Soros, Bill Gates, and the Ford family have become the new missionaries, preaching progress while exporting control. The media, architects of consent media empires owned by a handful of conglomerates, shape public opinion to fit elite narratives. They do not report, they condition. War becomes peace, slavery becomes freedom, austerity becomes responsibility. Journalists who speak truth are censored or fired. Stories that reveal the empire's crimes are buried. The public is given distraction, division, and deceit, the strategy of legitimacy. The brilliance of soft power lies in its ability to appear righteous. These tools manufacture legitimacy. When the IMF sends a loan, the UN praises the effort. When an NGO undermines a foreign government, the media calls it a people's revolution. No need for armies when you have academics, activists, and celebrities on payroll, echoing the same scripts. A prince's awareness. The true prince must see the velvet glove for what it is, a disguise. The enemy does not always come with a sword. Sometimes it comes with a smile, a grant, or a Nobel Prize. To protect a sovereign people, a ruler must dismantle the facade, expose the puppeteers, reject the colonization of the mind, and above all, replace these foreign instruments with authentic self-determined institutions. Only then can freedom be real. Chapter: Technocracy and Digital Tyranny, the final stage of control. The new digital economy is not a free market. It's a digital feudalism where a few tech lords control the cloud kingdoms. Inspired by Yanis Varoufakis, The Rise of EO, Techno-Feudalism. The digital revolution promised freedom, democratization, and the dismantling of old hierarchies. Instead, it birthed a new form of feudalism, a techno-feudal order where a handful of corporations control the infrastructure of the internet, cloud computing, and data itself. Yanis Varoufakis, economist and former Greek finance minister, coined this new era as techno-feudalism. He warns that we are entering a phase where private digital platforms and cloud-based services replace traditional states as the centers of power. Cloud capital, the new lords of the digital realm in this emerging economy. Data is the new gold and the cloud is the new castle. Corporations like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook are not just businesses. They are sovereign powers controlling the digital landscape. These tech giants control vast data centers and platforms that host everything from social media to financial transactions. The cloud economy centralizes power in the hands of a few, extracting rents from businesses and individuals who rely on their services. Access to cloud infrastructure has become a gatekeeper function. Without it, companies cannot operate, content cannot be distributed, and even governments become dependent on these private fiefdoms. The end of traditional capitalism. Varoufakis explains that this model upends classical capitalism. Instead of competition and open markets, the new economy is based on monopolies and control over data flows. The users become serfs, dependent on digital landlords for access, visibility, and survival. The power to collect, analyze, and weaponize data has become the ultimate form of control. The digital lords create algorithms that shape behavior, preferences, and even political opinions. Digital surveillance and social credit beyond economics, techno-feudalism extends into social control. Digital platforms monitor behavior, curate information, and influence decisions. The emerging social credit systems track conformity and dissent, rewarding obedience and punishing resistance. Governments cooperate with tech giants to enforce these controls, creating a hybrid model of surveillance and governance. Digital tyranny masked as progress. The masses are led to believe they enjoy unprecedented freedom and choice, while their digital lives are surveilled, manipulated, and commodified. Resistance. And awareness, the only defense is awareness. Understanding the mechanisms of techno-feudalism is the first step toward resistance. Public ownership of digital infrastructure, promotion of open-source technologies, decentralized platforms, and blockchain-based systems offer glimmers of hope against monopolistic control. But these alternatives face fierce opposition and require widespread political will and public engagement. A prince for the digital age, the modern prince must master the digital realm, not as a servant, but as a sovereign. He must champion digital sovereignty, fight for privacy, data ownership, and open access. Only by reclaiming control over the cloud can society regain freedom in the digital age. The battle for the future will be fought not only in the streets, but in the data centers and code repositories of the cloud empires. Chapter: Cryptocurrencies versus CBDCs, the new frontiers of money and control. The illusion of decentralization. Cryptocurrencies versus CBDCs, at first glance, Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin appear to promise a revolution, decentralized money free. From government and central bank control, they emerged as a rebellious alternative to the traditional financial system, anonymous, borderless, and seemingly untraceable. On the other hand, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are the digital versions of state-issued money. Unlike cryptocurrencies, CBDCs are centrally controlled by governments and central banks, designed to replace physical cash with programmable digital money. While cryptocurrencies claim to put power into the hands of the people, CBDCs place power squarely in the hands of the state and its financial overlords. The invisible hand behind crypto. Contrary to popular belief, cryptocurrencies were not born solely from the ideals of a mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto or anarchist programmers. The reality is far more complex and sinister. Crypto was a brilliant strategic move by intelligence agencies and the global financial elite to lure criminals, tax evaders, and those seeking to hide money away from government oversight into a monitored, traceable system. It's highly likely that organizations like the NSA and CIA had a hand in the creation, or at least the early adoption of cryptocurrencies. This would explain how blockchains, despite being decentralized, allow powerful entities unprecedented surveillance and control over financial flows under the guise of anonymity. Blockchain, the digital ledger of all things, the core technology. Behind cryptocurrencies is blockchain, a decentralized, immutable digital ledger that records every transaction transparently. But beyond currency, blockchain is poised to become the world's master registry for all assets, property deeds, stock certificates, intellectual property rights, and more. Imagine a global digital ledger that records ownership of every asset on Earth. This is a powerful tool for resetting property rights in an instant. With one keystroke, ownership records could be altered, erased, or redistributed, effectively enforcing the dystopian vision Klaus Schwab predicted. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. The shadow role of Roberto Giori and De La Ruggieri was personally connected to this story. Roberto Giori, the owner of De La Ruggieri, played a critical role in the emergence of digital currencies. De La Rue machines printed over 98% of the world's physical currency. In 2011, Giori was likely tapped by the Rothschild cabal to pioneer the CBDC project. His expertise in secure printing made him the perfect candidate to help transition the world from paper money to digital currency, a shift that consolidates control over global money supply in ways never before possible. Meeting Roberto Giori in 1986 gave me a glimpse into this hidden world. The story of Giori and his company is fascinating but little known, and it reveals how traditional currency printing elites are morphing into the architects of digital monetary control. Christine Lagarde, Roberto Giori, and the European digital currency. Christine Lagarde, current president of the European Central Bank and former IMF chief, has been a vocal and strategic supporter of digital currencies. Behind the scenes, she has championed the push for a European Central Bank digital currency, CBDC, that will give unprecedented control over the financial lives of European citizens. Lagarde's advocacy aligns closely with the legacy of Roberto Giori and De La Ruggieri, whose secure printing technologies transitioned into pioneering digital currency frameworks. The convergence of Giori's expertise and Lagarde's political power has been crucial in moving Europe toward a centralized digital currency regime. This digital euro will allow authorities to monitor, restrict, and even confiscate savings instantaneously, tools of control far beyond what physical cash ever allowed. China 2.0. The Rothschild-backed Laboratory of Control China has already implemented its version of a CBDC with the digital yuan, deploying sophisticated social credit systems and real-time financial surveillance. What most don't realize is that China 2.0 is not a mere evolution of Chinese policy, but a project created and heavily financed by the Rothschild global elite. China serves as the leading laboratory for testing mass surveillance, digital money control, and social engineering programs, including those that came with the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions and lockdowns. These experiments offer a blueprint for the West and the rest of the world, revealing how technology, finance, and authoritarian governance are merging into a global system of control. The big picture: control. Under the guise of innovation, when you connect all the dots, the rise of cryptocurrencies, the stealth development of CBDCs, the dominance of blockchain technology, and the involvement of shadowy elite families, the plan becomes clear. This is not a technological revolution for freedom. It's a carefully engineered transition toward total financial surveillance and control. Under this new regime, money ceases to be a tool of empowerment for the people and becomes a mechanism for enforcing obedience, compliance, and dependency.